So I thought I'd take out the steering column shaft to replace the lower bearing because I was noticing some squeaking noise and a little bit of play. Come to find out, the lower bearing is completely gone. The shaft, unfortunately, is gouged right here and everything, so we're worried about that. And even at the upper bearing location, it's gouged. So we're going to take it to a machine shop, let them weld and grind and fix it. Yeah, really kind of sad. You see all those loose balls from the destroyed ball bearing. Good thing we're replacing it. So we're going to replace the bottom bearing with a brass bushing. There are no moving parts, so this should do really well. And also, because the brass is softer than the steel, we should not be winding up gouging the shaft like we did last time with the failed bearing. So I took the bearing housing to a machine shop. They pulled out the outer bearing race and pressed in this brass bushing. And it was a little bit loose, so I actually silver soldered it to make sure it was nice and secure. And here you can see it slides on very nicely and should give us lots of good service. Since we have a floor shift, we didn't spend any time tearing apart the shift linkage for the column shift. Just left it the way it is, and we'll put the bearing back in its place, and we should be good to go. Okay, so we snugged up the bearing housing to the lower shift arm, but it's still free to move, which is what we want, but not a large gap. And we did that by rotating the housing with these nuts loose. These are angle slots, so as you rotate it, it pushes it up towards the shift arm. So I followed the Lugnut 65 blog and got all the rivets apart and took my rag joint apart for rebuild. And unfortunately, I found that my copper grounding strip was already broken, and need to do something about that. So I think the best way to go ahead on this is to cut off that thin piece and replace it with some stranded wire. That should do the trick. I kind of got it lined up, and we'll try a little rosin flux and solder and see how we do. Alright, so we got a little stranded wire between the two pieces with enough length that it's coiled around, giving the flexibility and adjustment required to put it in place. It's not pretty, but it should work. And here you can see the holes do line up actually pretty good, and should be no interference. Well, it's always something. So my rebuild kit for the coupling, steering coupling, you can see the holes don't line up with the old one. And when I try to put the bow tie on it, for example, and center one hole, you can see the other one is nowhere close. Look how far it misses. So we ordered another rebuild kit for the right years, and hopefully, and a different supplier, and hopefully the one that comes in will have the right holes. Otherwise, we'll have to figure something else out. All right, I don't know where I got the last kit, but this rubber disc lines up perfectly with the old one. So we should be in good shape. Start rebuilding the rag joint. Okay, so now you can see my little grounding strap that I repaired in place. I've got the large hole lug underneath the big pin, and a small hole will ground to the shaft, the piece on the shaft. So anyways, you'll notice that here the big pin over there is just a pin. On the small pin side, what we have is a nut with a collar that comes with a kit, and a pin with a serrated head that locks into the hole. That gives you space for the 7/16 hex head that you'll need to put in this locking pin. So here you can see the rebuild kit with the threaded pin that has a serrated collar and the low profile flat head. You can also see the collared nut that goes on the other end to become the small pin. So now you can see we got room to put a socket, 7/16 12-point socket around the key bolt, because that bolt with a serrated head tucks away nicely and makes room for the socket. All the rest are regular bolts with nuts. And the large pin there is threaded and has a nut and lock washer on the opposite side. It's only this one right here that has that serrated head to give you clearance. Alright, so we got the column through the firewall and the shaft in the column. We have not attached the shaft to the steering box yet. Waiting to get the spindles and everything lined up so we can put the wheel straight forward and line things up. So we got the bracket supporting the column in. We got the emergency brake bracket attached to the column support bracket, and we haven't done the firewall bracket yet, but it's in position. We'll get that next, and then come up here top side and put on the turn signal and the horn and the wheel and all that good stuff. Okay, we lined up the wheel spindles so we're looking straight ahead, and then we slid the rag joint onto the steering box after we lined up the arrow to the 12 o'clock position at the steering wheel side. Here you can maybe see the arrow on the end of the shaft pointing up to the 12 o'clock position, and that's what we oriented to slip the rag joint onto the steering box. Okay, so we've got the three pieces, 1, 2, 3, with the wires from the turn signal switch fed through, coming out here ready to connect. The switch is screwed into the collar, and turn signal handles back on. And yeah, so next we'll put on the horn ring and the steering wheel. The steering wheel is back on, but before we put the horn button on, we're going to have to move the column up to pick up the gap, and then we'll tighten everything down. Okay, so we've taken up the gap and cinched down the adjusting bolts. Time to put the horn button on, plug it in, and make sure everything works. And here you can see that the spring and clamp have been moved up so that they provide slight pressure against the bearing. Okay, job complete. There we have it. Steering wheel's in place. Horn works. Blinkers work. The new bushing replacing the damaged lower bearing. And we have a rebuilt rag joint. Everything working good.